Hello and welcome to WarrenThornton.com. Hello and welcome to WarrenThornton.com. A pretty long show for you tonight, and we'll get straight into it because there's been a lot of fun and games. Now, we will start, first of all, with some rather strange and rather idiotic stuff that has been going on. And of course, there are many, shall we say, idiots out there. So, of course, it could be a massive guess as to exactly what is going on. So let's start with this. First of all, you may well remember this when this first came out. So there we are. So that was Keir Starmer and, of course, the three young men. Now, of course, when we talk about, shall we say, Keir Starmer, some of the stuff he's got up to, he went to China, of course. He's got really hacked off because, of course, the Chinese have not treated him like royalty. Xi Jinping has left him to the Prime Minister, so it's a bit of a relegation, rather like Ursula von der Leyen. And of course, Starmer is the gift that keeps on giving. Have a look at this. There we go. Not even knowing where to walk when he was indicated to. Of course, anybody who's seen Starmer thinks he looks like a rabbit in the headlights at the moment. Shall we say, going over there. And of course, when he was walking around, he seemed to be completely lost. And in a fog, well, it may be a case that he's in a fog because this is the story that won't die and won't go away. Now, we all remember the three Ukrainian male models, of course, or supposed male models. Of course, one of them is not Ukrainian. And of course, there was a fourth man arrested who was then released. Now we have a bit of a problem because this ugly thing has reared its head again. Now, these three gentlemen are residing in Belmarsh, which is odd in itself. And of course, they put the date of the court case back until April. And of course, it may get even pushed even further back than April, because of course, there are many things that Starmer does not want to talk about. In fact, there is a D notice on some of the people making speculations. Well, here we don't care about D notice. We're going to tell you something that we have a source from Whitehall, and he is saying that these gentlemen were known to Starmer, and of course that Starmer may well have indulged. Now, we've only got this one gentleman saying that games of strip poker took place. Now, we don't have a confirmed source for that, So this is allegedly our source in Whitehall. But there is more to this than meets the eye, of course, because there is now a fifth man arrested. You may have heard about this. He was arrested over the Keir Starmer arson attack. Scotland Yard said a 19-year-old male was arrested in Harlow in Essex on conspiracy to commit arson. He was taken into custody at Essex Police Station for questioning and has since been released under investigation. The arrest is in relation to a Met Police investigation into a vehicle blaze last year on May the 8th, a fire at the entrance of a property on May the 11th, and a fire at a residential address on May the 12th that are very much connected to the Prime Minister. Now, a fourth man, 48 years of age, and his name has not been given out, who was arrested at Stansted Airport in June last year on suspicion of conspiracy to commit arson with intent to endanger life, has been released without charge. Now, we all know who that is. Now, three men have also been charged in connection with the fires. Ukrainians Petro Pochnok, 35, and Roman Laronovich, 21, and a 27-year-old Romanian national, Stanislav Karpuic. Now, Pochnok has been charged with conspiracy to commit arson with intent to endanger life. Lavranich with 3 counts of arson with intent to endanger life, while Kaparich has been charged with conspiracy to commit arson with intent to endanger life. They all deny the charges and been remanded in custody ahead of a trial at the Old Bailey on the 27th of April. Now, the charges relate to 3 arson incidents, a vehicle fire in Kentish Town, a fire at the Prime Minister's private home in the same street, and another blaze at an address where he previously lived in the Islington area. One of the fires took place in the early hours of May the 12th at the property where Keir Starmer lived before he became Prime Minister and moved into Downing Street. The car was torched in the same street 4 days earlier on May the 8th, and the other fire took place on May the 11th at the front door of a house converted into flats in Islington. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has let his £2 million private home in the Kentish Town area of North London to his sister-in-law on what they call a peppercorn rent since he moved into Downing Street following his general election. Property was set alight in the early hours of May the 12th, with the London Fire Brigade alerting police to reports of a fire there around 1:35 a.m. The blaze damaged the porch of the property, but no one was hurt. Firefighters were able to bring it under control within 20 minutes, stopping it spreading further indoors. It came just 24 hours after a flat the Prime Minister had previously lived at in the nearby Islington area had caught fire. Now, firefighters attended that blaze, helping one person to safety with the door of the property suffering damage. On May the 8th, in the same street as Sir Keir's Kentish Town property, a car he sold to a neighbour the year before also burst into flames. The new owner of the Toyota RAV4 is understood to have thought the fire started because of a faulty battery. The hybrid car was completely destroyed in the blaze, which occurred on VE Day. Now, the Met's Counter-Terrorism Command is leading the investigation, as all 3 targets of the alleged arson attack have previous connections with a high-profile public figure. We all know who that is. Now, it cannot be chucked away the simple fact that, of course, Keir Starmer, at the time when all these arrests were taking place, a dissident who had served in the Kanovich government had his laptop taken away when his apartment in Madrid was busted into by the Spanish police, and everything that was there, laptop and everything else, suddenly disappeared. Now, this gentleman had gone to Ukraine 3 days earlier to have a meeting with Zelensky, had come back, and he was gunned down in the streets in front of his daughter. And of course, MI6, once again, issued a D notice. So there's quite clearly a connection, because if you're issuing D notices to newspapers about something that is meant to be unconnected in Madrid, and of course, it is alleged this gentleman was running these male models, or certainly had evidence on the laptop of goings on with the male models, and it is being confirmed by a Whitehall source. Indeed, that they are very, very much trying to keep a lid on this and, shall we say, card game. Sean Murphy.
Well, it's no coincidence that all three have been charged with arse on,
Yes,
but on who? On who? And on
yes.
what?
It is quite staggering, isn't it? And I've got to say that some of the stuff that we're hearing, of course, is not substantiated. But of course, we have to ask the question: how did Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, know three young men, and the other two? One, of course, was released without charge, and he quickly scarpered out of the country, which is telling. And of course, just about that time, of course, the gentleman in Madrid who got shot, his name was Portnoy, and he was literally, we believe, and in fact we know that he flew to Ukraine 3 days before he was assassinated. Now, the fact that British intelligence got hold of the Spanish police and asked them to take away anything in the flat tells you that there has to be a connection. And many people are wondering what that connection is. And of course, he has also tried to have these hearings held in camera. So basically in private, citing matters of national security so that nobody talks about it, which of course sparks even worse. There are many, many, shall we say, people coming out with all sorts of things from shall we say, this is dogging him left, right, and centre. Rumours from cross-dressing to, of course, strip poker, that they're not really, shall we say, and this is alleged that they're not really male models. And in fact, there is nothing to suggest that they've done any modelling whatsoever. So, of course, everybody is looking at this and saying how bad this is, and we need to get to the bottom of it. Keir Starmer has not come out and said a thing about it. In fact, he's remained very, very quiet, and nobody in the House of Commons is allowed to table a question about this. Now, that should tell you everything you need to know. There is much, much more to see here. And as we know more, we'll let you know more. But there has been a fifth man arrested, and there are, as I say, unconfirmed reports coming out of Whitehall that they're trying to keep a lid on the activities that went on with Keir Starmer. As I say, as we know more, we'll let you know more. So while we're on the subject, shall we, of this absolute lunacy, have a little look at this. Now, this woman's name is Naomi. She's 33 and she's a school teacher. Nothing incredible about that, you might think. But of course, there is something incredible about that because she had been having an affair with a 12-year-old boy. That's correct. A 12-year-old boy. They had had sex on multiple occasions. And after a DNA test has revealed that the boy, the 12-year-old boy, is the father of her child, and she is 33 years of age, that he is the father of the child. She has now been arrested and faces 33 counts. Count them up. 33 counts of, shall we say, all sorts of goings on with children. And of course, this comes on the heels of our revelation. If you remember, a couple of months back, we told you that in America, this was an epidemic, that many, many of these women school teachers had, when they'd literally done a survey on it, turned out that 17% of the female school teachers in the USA who were under the age of 40 had slept with a student. Now, that may not sound like a lot, 17%, but there's a 1 in 5 chance that your school teacher has actually slept with a student, which, of course, this is sort of being kept very, very quiet in, shall we say, all around America. But this is pretty much an epidemic. Now, you have to say, if this was, a male school teacher, and indeed there has been lots of these about male school teachers, literally the book will be thrown at them. But of course, everybody's keeping that very, very quiet. And you have to wonder, is that something to do with some of the revelations that went on? Because the First Lady of France, Brigitte Macron, now there are Candace Owens, is saying that, of course, there is, as far as she's concerned, there is evidence that Brigitte Macron may not quite be what she seems. But there is no question whatsoever, and of course that's very much alleged. But there's no allegedness whatsoever to the fact that Brigitte Macron started at 39 years of age, fell in love with the 14-year-old Emmanuel Macron, and of course they waited until he was of age to consummate their friendship and their love. Now, if that doesn't give you the creeps or give you pause, it should. Sean Murphy.
Warren, where was that woman who had the child with the 12-year-old boy? Where was that? Was that the US or was that UK or France?
I believe it's in Australia, old boy.
Australia. All
So
right.
this is not. So this is not something that is going away soon. You know what I mean? It's very much. How can I put this? Seems to be a thing now with female empowerment, and I'm not having a go at females who are empowered, but the fact that she has a child at that age is quite incredible. He's 12. that would trouble me a lot. If it doesn't trouble you, it should do. And of course, this is something that is carrying on and on and on. It's not something that's going away. It seems that female empowerment has been taken to the nth degree, and it's probably a bad idea, Sean Murphy.
Yeah, what I was going to say was that the first photo you showed of her, it looked like it was at a wedding somewhere or
Yes,
some
she's married.
celebration.
Yes, she's married.
That was with her husband, was it?
That was her husband,
Or-
and he was the one who
I suspect it's her ex-husband now.
absolutely. He was the one who had the DNA test done. There we go. And of course, that's well, let's put it this way: you don't really want your name to come out, because basically, all you're going to hear for the rest of your life is you couldn't satisfy your wife while a 12-year-old boy could. Lee Williams.
I was going to say, is it kind of a majority thing in Western countries now that the teachers are younger than they used to be on average?
Yes,
so the
they
people
are.
that, yeah,
They
yeah,
are,
just
and
gonna
of
add
course,
that.
yeah, there is that, and of course there is also the standard of people that are becoming teachers. There are people who become teachers' assistants, which of course they're not a fully fledged teacher at all. They help out in the classroom, do various bits and pieces and things like that. And this tends to be the teachers' assistants were quite high up in the list of American, shall we say, female teachers who had literally said that they'd slept with students. So the moral decline, should we say, is definitely coming out. Now, shall we say, let's get into this now, because we had our wonderful, shall we say, gentleman who gives us all the skinny on what's going on with Dmitry Peskov. And he told us about basically the chat that Lavrov and Peskov had regarding what was going on with the talks that were going on with the Ukrainians. And many people turned around and said, oh, we don't know what's going on. Well, we did, and we told you. And now Lavrov has come out and confirmed everything that we were saying. So the key takeaways from Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov are these. The truce sought by Vladimir Zelensky of 60 days was unacceptable to Russia. The conflict in Ukraine stems from a Western geopolitical project aimed at destroying Russia. Ukraine is a pawn, a tool used, this is Lavrov saying this, by the way, used by the West to pose a direct threat to Russia's security. The West prepared the battle in Ukraine in advance and planned to bring Kiev into NATO. Moscow has not seen the security guarantee agreement between Washington and Kiev. Europeans are playing down the Russian army's achievements in Ukraine. Washington's 28-point plan for resolving the conflict demands Kiev reinstate the rights of ethnic minority, including linguistic and religious rights. Ukraine has used all previous truces to throw more people onto the front line and continue the war. Therefore, we will not be allowing that to happen. This doesn't affect the truce until February the 1st, with Putin hitting the energy grid in Kiev. Now, that's a separate agreement. The West seek to guarantee security for Vladimir Zelensky's regime, but it won't prevent the conflict from reigniting. And Europe seeks to derail the positive developments on Ukraine and reverse them. But the key takeaway from Sergei Lavrov, and we've mentioned this over and over again, and Peskov, as far as we're concerned, we said that this has got to be done. And America are coming out and saying, no, it's about the conflicts, it's about the territories, it's a key sticking point. It is not. Sergei Lavrov has confirmed what we were saying. The Ukrainian conflict is not about territories, but about the Nazi regime seeking to destroy everything Russian. So there you have it. And of course, while we're talking about the moratorium strikes on energy infrastructure, I can say indeed, Peskov has confirmed President Trump made a personal request to President Putin to refrain from striking Kiev for a week until February the 1st in order to create favorable conditions for negotiations. That's all I can say on this topic. So Peskov has come out and confirmed that phone call did indeed take place. And of course, they've turned around and said that they are quite happy to do that, but it's not a problem. Now, Whitaker of NATO, the US permanent representative to NATO, came out and said the parties to the negotiations in Ukraine are getting closer and closer to a settlement working on technical issues. This is nonsense. And we have this from the gentleman who's very close to Peskov. And he's always right. He stressed the issues of splitting territories between Russia and Ukraine is the most complex. Whitaker also said that it has already been possible to agree on US guarantees for Ukraine. They have not. We have this from Peskov's, from our friend who's very close to Peskov. Peskov is denying, and Russia are denying this 100%. They are nowhere near agreeing any sort of security guarantees whatsoever. And of course, Putin also turned around and just stated that he did not take the initiative to invite Zelensky anywhere. It was Zelensky who requested a meeting. This is also from Peskov. In response, Putin told him, yes, we are ready, but only in Moscow. To which point Zelensky turned around and said, well, we'll invite him to Ukraine. Well, that's obvious nonsense because neither of them are going to go anywhere. And we may as well just take that as read. That's simply not going to happen. Okay. So hopefully that's the whole thing about what's going to happen and are people going here and who's, are we close to a deal and everything else? We are nowhere near close to a deal. And of course, something else that is quite, Zelensky is getting a lot of stick for. I've got to say, I did chuckle when I saw this because, of course, people on social media were getting very, very interested in this. Now, Ukraine, turning around and thanking Maloney. Ukraine distributes boilers from Italy to support heating for up to 90,000 homes. Ukraine has distributed industrial boiler equipment delivered by Italy among communities in 10 regions, Deputy Prime Minister Aleska Kuleba said on January the 29th. And basically, people were saying, turn around and said, that's very kind of Zelensky to call Maloney an old boiler. And of course, Zelensky's been getting stick for this left, right and centre because, of course, his people are able to dance the night away, or the rich people are able to dance the night away in these clubs and everything else. And of course, nothing is happening to them. It only seems to be happening to the poor Ukrainians. And of course, there's many of these. Now, do you remember? We are going to show you this once again because do you remember this? Let's have a look. Oh, that's the wrong one. We're going to show you that one in a second. We're going to show you this one first. And of course, We have shown you this before. Now, we turned around and told you what was happening, that they didn't want to pay the money to the Ukrainian fallen, and they were hiding the death toll. And we showed you this video in the crematorium, which was sent to us by somebody who worked in the crematorium, that they were stuffing dead bodies into the ovens and burning them. And of course, they didn't want to pay out the over $350,000 American dollars that they would have to give every single person who died, who signed up to go. So they were stuffing the crematoriums full of these and cremating the bodies of as many soldiers as they possibly could, to negate ever having to pay them, and just still list them as missing, or no idea where they were, possibly they've gone abroad and everything else. So this is the Ukrainian government that are hiding this from the people. And of course, many people have turned around and said that this is complete nonsense and everything else. It's all a fake, it's all AI. It's not. And of course, this has been happening over and over and over again. There's 4 different crematoriums, and they've been doing it a lot. And of course, the poor so-and-sos have been, should we say, we've been proved right. Have a look at this.
Ебать мой хуй, сука. Ёбаний в рот, блядь. Диви, що робиться, блядь. Нахуй кому ця єбуча війна надо, блядь. Де ті ёбані генерали, сука, блядь. Підараси, блядь. Диви, що, сука, роблять, нахуй. Диви, що падли єбучі, блядь. Пацани, давайте, блядь, давайте. Зараз ще хлопці ще один до підходик, нахуй. Привозик ще один, там до утра вас времени, блядь. Ёбаний в рот, нахуй. Вот сука, а. Це пиздец, блядь, а.
My thanks to Lord Bebo for that video. And of course, we highlighted this months ago, and nobody believed us. Now, perhaps you will believe us. And this is something that, of course, is quite horrific. And of course, this is one of the reasons why we keep talking about this and saying how bad it is. Please, can we put a stop to it? Everybody knows and is fully aware. BlackRock, we showed the letter that BlackRock said, why don't you burn the bodies? Therefore, you don't have to make the payments. Trust a bank to come out with that. And if you think that's bad, then, of course, we look at the TCC, don't we? Which is, of course, the press gangs who grab these people and they throw them onto the front line after beating them up and throwing them. Let's have a little look. So let's have a little look at this. And let's see if the eagle eye can spot.
У меня маленький ребенок! Люди! Меня старый черт, мой папа тебя убьет! Суки! Люди! 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 Помогите!
Now, that is obviously distressful as her husband gets carted away to be thrown onto the front line. But even worse, we have told you that many of the people in the Azov battalions, these are the neo-Nazis that, of course, don't want to go and fight and die on the front line. They have to grab loads and loads of people, enough people to keep them off the front line. Now, we've got people like Adam Kinzinger and Kaya Kallis who have been to these NAFO things, and of course Richard Woodruff as well, who have raised funds for these Azov battalions. They've actually raised funds not only for vehicles for the TCC to throw these people onto the front line And of course, they throw them into a van, they get killed, and then they throw them in an oven. But we absolutely, time and time again, we have said that the Azov battalions, the neo-Nazis, are not the ones that are going to the front line. They're grabbing people and throwing them onto the front line, and the neo-Nazis in there are being saved from going to the front line, where everybody says, oh, Azov are going to go here. This is the picture from that, where they were throwing that guy in. As you can see, on his arm lapel there is a Nazi. Hopefully that clears up any doubt or any danger about what is truly going on here. And of course, we once again turn around and say that this should be stopped. And we're going to clear something else up as well. You would have heard about the civilian train that was bombed by the Russians. Absolutely terrible. And we said that there were no casualties. Well, there was one. That has come out now that there was one casualty. Now, what they've done was there was a train going to the Donbass. They packed the drones into one carriage and they put civilians in all the other carriages. Now, the Russians very, very cleverly managed to hit that one carriage and not cause any damage to anybody else on the train whatsoever. Not one civilian was killed. Then Ukraine came out and said, yes, they had killed a civilian, and then they named it. And then we were able to find out that he was actually traveling in that carriage with the drones, and he wasn't a civilian at all. He was a sergeant in the military. Hope that clears that up. And of course, many, many people are still pushing this nonsense out there, and they obviously haven't seen what we have. And of course, and another thing as well, when they say that they're bombing a factory, a tobacco factory went up in smoke, if you'll pardon the pun, in Kharkiv. And it belonged to Philip Morris. And of course, this is Philip Morris, you will remember the tobacco company, Marlboro, this, that, and the other. And of course, everybody was saying how terrible it was and everything else. Well, it hadn't been used for making cigarettes since 2022. And when they hit it, of course, all the ammo went up that was being stored in there. So they're moving it by trains, keeping it in tobacco warehouses, you name it. And of course, we thought it was really, really important that you get to know everything that's going on there, because, of course, the Ukrainians are trying to come out with all sorts of nonsense when it comes to this. And there are many, many, should we say more, that it's going to be a problem. Two guys were saved by Romanians, and they were very, very lucky indeed. They were suffering from hypothermia and could barely move. They were trying to cross the border to get away from being press ganged into the army. Now, the Romanians very nicely have admitted them to hospital. They have not been returned and will not be returned to Ukraine. They could barely move. They were literally almost frozen to death on the spot. And that is what it is like for them, because they are literally, everybody is running from being thrown onto these front lines. And anybody that turns around and thinks that everything is okay, it is not. Everybody turns around and says how terrible the Russians are. It's not the Russians. It really isn't. And you need to wake up and literally, should we say, take stock of what's really going on in this war. Lavrov also had a word about Victoria Nuland.
Russia has or was back then considered as a competitor on the global stage. They were hoping that it would collapse like the Soviet Union. We are aware of a number of facts, and President Putin has talked about it for multiple times. It was a combat that has been financed and prepared for in advance, including by Americans. Victoria Nuland, now not part of State of the Department of State, said genuinely that they spent $5 billion for the coup d'etat in Ukraine and turning it into an anti-Russia. you all can access this information. We're not talking about a conflict between the two countries. It's about a geopolitical conflict.
So there we go. That was Sergei Lavrov talking about Victoria Nuland. Now, some of you, if you've been on another planet, may well not know who Victoria Nuland was. Well, she was the Secretary of State, and of course, she was very much mixed up in being responsible for overthrowing the democratically elected government of Ukraine, and then, of course, replacing it with various lunatics like Petro Poroshenko, who said we will make their children hide in cellars. Victoria Nuland, here we are.
We, of course, never choose candidates in any country. But what we do in countries that proclaim to be democracies is we offer the opportunity for candidates of all kinds to learn how to put themselves forward to best effect.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably.
We don't do that now, though. We don't mess around in other people's elections, Jim.
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that?
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience. He's the guy, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. He needs to be talking to them 4 times a week. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
We, of course, never choose candidates in any country. We offer the opportunity for candidates of all kinds to learn how to put themselves forward to best effect, and we always support the right of peaceful political protest in any country.
So just remember that peaceful political protest. Remember what happened at the Maidan. Now, Victoria Nuland is married to one of the Kagan brothers. The Kagan brothers, of course, her sister-in-law, Victoria Nuland's sister-in-law, actually works at the Institute for the Study of War. So if you ever see any, and many people take that as a Bible. So if you see that coming up on your newsfeed, the Institute for the Study of War, please just give it a complete miss. Now, Victoria Nuland gave millions and millions. There was 5 billion, obviously, pumped into it, but a hell of a lot of that money went to the National Endowment for Democracy. And what they do is they wait. They literally put sanctions on a country. They wait for these sanctions to bite hard. Then they devalue the currency like they did in Iran. And then what happens is you get these people coming out and protesting amongst the protesters come the NGOs with their violent paramilitary companies and the people they've suborned to do it, where they've given them weapons, and then the violence starts. And then, of course, we get the overthrow of the government. And the National Endowment for Democracy are hugely wrapped up in this. What we're going to do is we're going to take you over to Iran just for the start, because the nonsense that went on with the death toll. We're going to play you this video because it is relevant to the remember that name, the National Endowment for Democracy. Hello and welcome to WarrenThornton.com. Now, since the Islamic Republic of Iran imposed a nationwide internet blackout to crack down on foreign intelligence-backed riots, and we all know who those are if you've been watching our show, these claims of massive death tolls, none of which provide any credible evidence at all, continue to circulate in a coordinated fashion, amplified by Iranian opposition media and the mainstream Western press alike. Amid the wave of Western coverage on Iranian protests, a Toronto-based NGO issued an outrageous claim that Iran had killed 43,000 protesters and wounded another 350,000. The group behind the figure, the International Center for Human Rights, or the ICHR, more about them in a minute, offered no footage, no forensic evidence, no data whatsoever, and no independently verifiable proof. However, this went viral as intended. So did similar or even more extreme death tolls. They were echoed across social media by these influencers, recycled by opposition outlets like Iran International, and eventually laundered into Western corporate media coverage. The figures vary wildly from 5,000 to 8,000 dead and lack even the pretense of substantiation. but they also have a clear political purpose to build a case for overthrowing the Iranian government for the benefit of Israel and the USA. Now, the lowest estimate of Iran protest deaths is 5,000. That came from the US-based group Human Rights Activists in Iran, which admits it's still investigating 17,000 additional cases. Now, the HRAR is no independent arbiter. It was partnered with, guess who? The National Endowment for Democracy, or NED, the US soft power tool established under former President Reagan to continue the CIA's work under NGO cover, and the people who were responsible under Victoria Nuland for starting the Ukraine war. Another frequent source for Iran's death toll is the Abraham Boroman Center for Human Rights in Iran, which is also funded by, guess what, the National Endowment for Democracy. See a pattern here. One of its board members is a gentleman called Francis Fukuyama, who's a signatory to the infamous neoconservative blueprint for the War on Terror, the project for the new American century. And we all remember the WMDs, don't we? Then there is the United Against Nuclear Iran outfit, which claimed 12,000 Iranians were killed in the protest. This lobbying outfit successfully pressured the World Economic Forum to disinvite Iran's foreign minister and counts among its ranks, are former Mossad chief Meir Dagan, current US Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, and Dennis Ross of the Israel lobby's think tank Winnet. Now, the ICHR, remember we promised we would tell you about them, the group behind the 43,000 deaths claim, is based in Canada and solely focused on Iran. It openly celebrates Israeli assassinations of resistance leaders, or what they call terrorists, and praises the growing friendship between Israel and the Iranian opposition. Its executive director, Ardeshi Zadeh, has published photos of himself posing with Israel and monarchistic flags. Now, despite the bombast, the ICHR's report offers no evidence. It relies on unverifiable comparative investigation analysis and anonymous sources, and falsely claims 95% of killings occurred over just 2 days. There is no footage of anything approaching those numbers it alleges. Meanwhile, the Iran Human Rights Documentation Center, another US State Department funded outfit, once promoted a bizarre claim that a protester faked his death and hid in a body bag for 3 days. Even the outfit themselves admitted it couldn't verify the story, but the opposition outlet, Iran International, broadcast it anyway. Now, Tommy Robinson and many influencers have pushed the more outlandish stories, including the allegations that Iran's security forces suffered protesters by zipping them alive into body bags. No evidence required, just one anonymous voice note. The IHRDC has also been consulted by the US government to guide its sanctions policy, would you believe? So much for fairness and transparency, including the creation of a blacklist targeting Iranian individuals. Its executive director, Shannon Malani, recently posted on X that US President Donald Trump's overtures to Iran protesters, if not backed up by overwhelming support to cripple the government's armed forces, would constitute the greatest betrayal of Iranians by the West. This is part, of course, as a broader US strategy, where Washington has poured funding into dozens of NGOs focused solely on Iran, from women's rights outfits to ethnic minority advocacy groups, all tasked with feeding the narrative architecture of overthrowing the government. Now, the propaganda pipeline runs from many hundreds of online influencers to Western media, and you've only got to have a look. There are loads of them out there. Just have a look at who is posting these ridiculous death tolls, and of course you will soon find out. Take online activist Sana Ebrahimi, who claimed 80,000 protesters have been killed, citing only a friend in contact with sources inside the government. Sana Ebrahimi, the sources inside the government don't contact you. And we have that from sources within inside their government. Her post garnered over 370,000 views. Now, soon after, British radio station LBC News quoted an Iranian human rights activist named Paul Smith, who upped the death toll to 45 to 80,000. Smith, it turns out, is a regime change agitator on social media who endorses US military intervention in Iran. In October 2025, the Israeli daily Haaretz exposed how Tel Aviv funds Farsi-speaking bot farms to promote Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's former monarch, and spread anti-government propaganda. These same bots are helping to inflate Iran protest narratives. Back in 2022, it's a digital war campaign being masked as grassroots outrage from no other than the US and the Israeli. Now, Times magazine claims 30,000 Iranians have been killed, citing two anonymous health ministry officials. Iran International topped that, citing its own two anonymous health officials to allege 36,000. Only Amnesty International, despite its hostile posture towards Tehran, refrained from a specific number, saying that only 1,000 had died. Now, that estimate, roughly along with Tehran's own figures and figures we have from people inside embassies inside Iran, Iran's Foundation of Martyrs and Veterans Affairs reports just over 3,000 deaths. The official death toll is 3,117, including 2,427 civilians and security personnel. Now, what we are seeing is something far, far worse. Now, let's give you a rundown of that, because over 600 of them are terrorists or freedom fighters, whichever you want to call them, depending whether you're in the West or you're in Iran. The verifiable figures we have from embassy sources and military intel inside the country put the figures at around 3,000. So that sounds about right. Now, what must also be told is, a huge number of these people were non-protesters that were killed by protesters. And we've shown you the footage of just one of many, many videos that are out there from CCTV. Now, very, very simply, what we've got here is a coordinated effort, a misinformation offensive driven by Washington-backed networks, Tel Aviv's propaganda arms, monarchists, opposition in exile, and a compliant corporate media press, as well as social media influencers who, let's face it, are an absolute disgrace to the human race. The grotesque death toll and phantom atrocity stories began circulating following a familiar imperial playbook: the bogus incubator babies in Kuwait in 1990, the forged weapons of mass destruction claim in Iraq 2003, the invented Libyan genocide in 2011, and the endless chemical weapons fabrication in Syria. Each time the purpose was the same: overthrow the government. Has nothing to do with nuclear, has nothing to do with protesters, and they don't care how many Iranians died. If they cared about the Iranians, they wouldn't have had sanctions on normal Iranian people for so many years. And of course, the mayhem of recent terrorist operations in Iran literally did this. They destroyed 305 ambulance and buses, 24 petrol stations, 700 shops, 300 private homes, 750 banks. I wonder why they did that. Would that be so you couldn't withdraw your money and leave the cities? 414 government buildings, 749 police stations, 120 basis centers, 15 libraries, 200 schools, 2 Armenian churches, 253 buses, 600 ATMs, 800 private cars. And we're also talking about 350 mosques, not one synagogue of over the 100 that are there. And you will hear people turning around and saying they were hiding weapons inside the mosque. Once again, not one verifiable source can actually show that to be true. And that's the reason why Muslims were burning mosques. I have a bridge to sell you. So the total death toll stands at 3,117. Civilians and security forces, 2,427. Terrorists, 690. Now, it may please you to know, or may interest you to know, that the original demonstration by proper Iranian people, of course, was over the rial, which absolutely lost all its value, the currency of Iran. Now, very simply, it wasn't coordinated with the Americans, but the banks shorted the rial so that the actual currency of Iran lost 40% of its value. Of course, then that started the normal protests that they could then attach themselves to and turn them violent. This is playbooks we've seen in Serbia, we've seen it in Georgia, We've seen it in many, many countries. And of course, just in case you were wondering, the Americans weren't quite ready to go. Now they are ready to go. Guess what? We've got another run on the Iranian currency. Suddenly, overnight, it's dipped by 16%. I wonder what could be going on. There we are. So that was a little video we made just to explain everything that's going on with the numbers, and the death toll that's going on, and the nonsense that's coming out. And here we go again, because we told you there about the endless chemical warfare nonsense that came out about the Syrians, and the neocon think tank, the Hudson Institute, has said that Iran's strike involved a radiological dirty bomb. Iran's direct response for Trump's assassination of Iran's Quds Force Commander General Qasem. This was back in 2020. The Hudson Institute didn't provide any hard evidence to support this explosive claim, which mirrors the lie sold by the US intel community ahead of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Long-term symptoms among US military personnel on the base likely stem from blast trauma and stress, not specialized munitions, as the Hudson Institute is claiming. Now, the neoconservative think tank has very, very close ties with the Pentagon, employing many former officials and penning strategy briefs for the actual department. So that just gives you a quick heads up about everything that's gone on. We'll be returning to Iran later, but there are some other things that you need to know about Ukraine that have slipped quietly under the radar, and we're going to get into those now, including the idiot that is, of course, Stu. But the most important thing we're going to tell you here is the tanker. You remember the ones that, of course, shall we say, that the French captured, and of course were holding it, and they made a big play about it. Well, France are releasing the Russian so-called shadow tanker it recently captured. This was due to illegal implications, and separately doesn't help their issue. But of course, it's been proven that France just grabbed this tanker. There is not one piece of evidence to show that it is a Russian shadow tanker. So they've had to let it go and let it go on its way. Isn't that quite amazing? So the shadow tanker that the French grabbed hold of, nothing of the sort. Let's get into this idiot now.
And I have met Putin a few times. I think the DNA of Russia is still expansion and imperialism. And I think the driver of Putin is Ruski Mir, Great Russia, which basically means one Russia, one language, one religion, and one leader.
So please remember that, Stu there, calling the DNA of Russia expansion and imperialism, the driver of Putin, Great Russia, which basically means one language, one religion, and one leader. I don't know if anybody has told Stu that in Russia there are more than 190 ethnic groups, over 100 different languages, and there are over 20 million Muslims in Russia. This is the guy they are selecting, or they want to select, to go and talk to the Russians. Doesn't seem like a good idea, does it, when you hear that idiot go on with nonsense. He obviously doesn't know a thing about what he's talking about here. And of course, we will just keep an eye on him and what he's up to. There are many, many other things that have gone on as well that we need to talk about. And this is quite, I would say, quite awful. We're talking about all sorts of nonsense that's going on with Ukraine. And Thatcher once came out, Margaret Thatcher once came out and said if anybody they were to be jealous of, it would be Russia. I'm going to play you a little clip from this video because it is very, very telling.
If you were to make a table of countries in proportion to the natural resources they have, the top one would almost certainly be Russia. She has everything: oil, gas, diamonds, platinum, gold, silver, all the industrial metals, marvelous standing timber, a wonderfully rich soil. But countries are not rich in proportion to their natural resources. Countries are rich whose governments have policies which encourage the essential creativity, initiative and enterprise of man and recognize his desire to do better for his family.
So there we go. Thatcher turning around and saying, Russia literally has it all. And we're going to play you a little video now. Make yourself a cup of coffee, sit yourself down. Mike Jones is a very good commentator who doesn't get enough, shall we say, airtime when he's talking about things inside of Russia. He is a British young man who became a journalist in Russia, and we're going to hear from him after we've heard from Nicholas.
Yeah, I think Mr. Thatcher was right. Yeah. But I think what a lot of people didn't realise, I was told from people I knew working in the City of London, a lot of the money that was used to buy up, given to the oligarchs, like Abramovich, came from the City of London. And it came from the Deputy of Jews as well.
Yeah.
And this is why many of the Russian oligarchs were Jewish, because that's where they got the money. So, yeah, Mrs. Thatcher might have had been told that and said, when the wall falls down, and because they had Yeltsin in their pocket, and he was a drunk, they could do almost anything with him. He sold everything off bargain prices. It's a bit like Churchill selling off Britain to the Americans during the Second World War at bargain prices. And the Russian was even sold off even cheaper. And so she probably had good intelligence for that.
That's a good point. Well made. While we're on the subject of Russia and everything else, the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, Zelensky once again, Nicholas. Oh, you're just taking your hand down. Okay. The Zaporozhye nuclear power plant once again is in the news. We are not giving up any territory in Donbass, and we are certainly not giving up the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Once again, and this is for the Americans. It's not for the Ukrainians, because they wouldn't have control of it anyway. But they, every single time that, of course, this goes on, we get the same old nonsense. And of course, should we say, this is going to be an ongoing situation where they're just going to keep going on about this. And of course, we're getting the same good nonsense from MI6, who have turned around. The Russians are now saying they have absolute evidence because Zelensky tried to say that when they did the lorry loads of drones that they used to attack deep inside of Russia, they said it was all their own work. And the Russians are saying that's absolute nonsense, because they've got the serial numbers from obviously the drones and everything else, and they know that MI6 are part of it. Now, the Daily Telegraph, which is MI6's mouthpiece, are saying Russian forces advanced slower than any army in the past century. And of course, that is meant to make you think that the Russians are absolutely incompetent. The fact that they don't need to advance, very simply, the Ukrainians are throwing people on the front line and dying in great numbers, should tell you everything that you need to know. There is a meme going around about Putin, who has turned around and said that he is going to allow no bombing whatsoever of Kiev's electrical supply until February the 1st. Well, really, he could go a bit longer than that if he really wanted to, for the simple fact that it takes them about 6 weeks to re-engineer everything and throw it back up online. And of course, this has been doing the rounds. There we go. Don't bomb Kiev. It's cold there. Putin saying, what about Iran? But it's not cold in Iran, which we thought was quite, yes, Operation Red Spider. Thank you very much for that, Mo. I've forgotten the name of the operation for a while there. And of course, they're saying that they did it all on their own. No, they didn't. It was complete nonsense. They were helped by both America, and they were helped also by, shall we say, lots and lots of different people as well. Quite crazy. It is unbelievable when you hear the nonsense that goes on to do with this. So let's get into some other things then. Let's have a listen to what Mike Jones had to say. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It is Friday, the 30th of January, and just before the weekends, there's been a flurry of news regarding negotiations, people inviting each other to the capital cities, the respective ones. Here, it's super snowy, just near Moscow. Let me show you what woke me up at 9:30 this morning. Well, actually, I was already awake. That's when I heard it. It's Sini tractor, blue tractor, finally ploughing the road outside my house. Off-grid, t.me/off-grid on Russia on Telegram, off-grid in Russia.com if you want to follow my off-grid content there and get away from geopolitics. We keep it apolitical. Anyway, let's get into the news today. So this is the story regarding not a ceasefire, and we have to be clear about that. In some channels, it's kind of reported as a ceasefire. It's not. It's like a cessation of targeting the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. Now, this is pretty surprising stuff. Russia agreed to refrain from strikes on Ukraine until February 1st. Now, I can understand why initially, upon reading this, Russians might be a little bit angry. Because that was my first thought. I was like, why? We've seen this movie before. It played out many times in 2022. It keeps replaying itself, where Russia gives an inch and Ukraine takes a mile. Whenever we see negotiations progress in a positive way towards peace, Ukraine will launch a strike against Russia. We'll poke the bear, essentially. We've had, oh my gosh, there's too many to remember. I'm thinking of even just those drones that are in containers. I'm not going to even bother listing them all. Russia has agreed, and here's the key part, to Trump. This was a personal request to President Putin from Trump. Peskov has kind of clarified things a little bit, and he does state that we're talking about creating favorable conditions for negotiations. And yes, it was a personal appeal from President Trump. Previous evening, Trump said he'd personally asked President Putin for a week-long ceasefire in Kiev and other cities, and Putin agreed. Now, when I was in the army and you got orders that you didn't understand, or let's say were tempted to disagree with, I learned very quickly you keep your mouth shut. I learned the hard way at 17 years old of opening my mouth. And yeah, I was duly educated. So I tend to apply that rule to these cases where I feel like there's stuff I don't know and I can't know. Initially, my first thought was that there's a bigger picture at play here. If it's Trump and Putin personally, we still don't know what was discussed in Anchorage. I'm assuming there's some big ticket business deals potentially to be had that are mutually beneficial for America and Russia, probably in the Arctic in the north. So I'm thinking there's other cogs and wheels turning in the background, but there are other opinions on this matter as to why this was readily agreed to, and I'm guessing enacted. I haven't seen any news of any further strikes. Now, according to Shalandin, the reason is Moscow readily agreed to the step because the strike's objectives have been achieved. Now, I don't know how true that is, or whether that is to placate that element, including serving soldiers who might be particularly disappointed, because after all, once you have the enemy on the ropes, why would you back down? Why would you give them a reprieve? If General Frost is stepping in to give you a hand, why back off? Well, I can kind of see the rationale here. We've broken everything down. There's not a single live power plant there, not a single generating facility, not even a heating plant or an electric grid. And that's a fact. I'm inclined to agree. Let them work, let them spend the money, let them do something else. No questions asked. We'll figure it out later anyway. And again, yeah, pretty true. Anything they fix in this time will be quickly destroyed, I'm sure. So maybe I have mixed feelings about this. I'm inclined to agree that by placating Trump on this, with what is claimed to be minimal cost, really, in the achieving of objectives or the grand scheme of things, some credit from Trump may be useful in other negotiations, like I've just stated. So that's certainly something that triggered mixed emotions in myself, and that made me think that just trust the boss on this one. There's times when you just got to trust the gov. Zelensky stated it's impossible to meet Putin in Moscow, and this is what I was referring by these invitations every which way. Now, what I posted on Telegram and what I saw was actually Zelensky saying, let Putin come to Kiev if he dares. So Zelensky giving it the Billy Big Balls. And he's done that before. Do you remember back in 2022 when Zelensky was hiding in the bunker, and then I believe Putin publicly, or I don't know, as a private assurance to the West that Russia wouldn't target Zelensky in particular with these hypersonic missiles that they were bricking it about. Then after Zelensky got that news, he started giving it the Billy Big Balls, started making threats, and then he was cock of the walk. Here it says the Ukrainian leader said he would invite Putin to Kiev in return, but doubted that a meeting in that format was realistic. This is a much safer translation than the one I read. Ukrainian President Zelensky stated he does not intend to meet with Russian President Putin in Moscow. He said that in response to such an invitation, he would invite the Russian leader to Kiev. I can definitely invite him to Kiev, let him come. I'm publicly inviting him. But if someone doesn't want to meet, but can't say so directly for some reason, then these invitations to Moscow are issued. Strange translation, and I am leaning towards the translation that I posted may have been paraphrasing this rather, word salad, really, from Zelensky, that is big nothing burger at the end of the day. Interestingly, in this article, it states, last September, during a visit to China, and I remember this, Putin invited Zelensky to Moscow, explaining to his American counterpart Trump, his American counterpart Trump had requested a meeting. So this isn't the first time, which is why my eyes kind of glazed over at this back and forth. The Ukrainian leader responded by saying the invitation to Moscow meant that the Kremlin did not actually want the meeting. And it's like, how does Zelensky know what the Kremlin wants? How is Zelensky now an authority on the Kremlin? And if he is one, then how are we here in this situation? So, yeah, it's pretty much business as usual. Negotiations that don't really appear, despite Trump claiming great progress, probably the best progress in the world in history of any American president ever, has just taken place. Yeah, sure, Trump, but from what I'm seeing, no real results. Lavrov has clarified that this, and again, this is where I was getting into about the talk of ceasefire. Once again, he's repeated again the same stuff that he said before, that this idea of a ceasefire is just untenable for Russia, and Russia is never going to agree to it, and I absolutely understand why. It will, like Minsk 1 and 2, be used for rearming, reorganizing, regrouping, and probably more attacks on places like the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, which we'll get into in just a second. Lavrov's actual quote is been said many times. President Putin has often reminded us that the ceasefire that Zelensky is again seeking, even if it lasts for at least 60 days and preferably longer, is unacceptable to us. Absolutely. And why would Russia agree to such a thing? So this narco-gremlin just keeps going on the same script. I mean, credit to him, he's an actor, so he's sticking to the script. Great, well done. But it's just not going to get anyone anywhere. And what the other thought that occurred to me was, in the last video, we discussed about the changing bones of contention within the negotiations. Back in Abu Dhabi, the first day it was something like territorial concessions. This was the key sticking point. Couldn't reach an agreement on it, an impasse. But then that wasn't a problem anymore. It was now security guarantees. Ukraine needed security guarantees. They got security guarantees, but then they didn't want the security guarantees because the troops wouldn't be experienced in drone warfare, as is the case. What I mean by all of this is I did wonder if one of the factors behind certainly Putin's agreement to Trump for cessation of this targeting the energy infrastructure may well be, what if one of these conditions that Ukraine just cannot and will not, and even the West probably, will not adhere to or accept or even acknowledge, certainly publicly. I wonder if this was perhaps something discussed in Anchorage. What if that condition is bringing all these Nazis to justice? Because I wouldn't accept anything less, personally. What I think is irrelevant. But what if, because we've had it stated back in those negotiations that this neo-Nazism has to be eradicated. That is a stated objective of the special military operation. So what if, to achieve that, that means holding to account and bringing to justice not just the narco gremlin Zelensky, that means Poroshenko, he's guilty, because not all of this is, to be fair, on Zelensky's shoulders. As we know, he's a puppet, and his predecessors have contributed to this. So there's Poroshenko. That also includes Zaluzhny. Poroshenko and Zaluzhny allegedly conspiring now with regards to these elections. Then you've got the likes of Kuleba. Is it Kuleba? Kuleba? I don't know how you pronounce that Harry Potter idiot's name. Currently residing in the US, I believe. Budanov. We're talking about the entire administration, and not just present ones, but past ones. What if that's the case? I can see that as being something Russia would demand, and something that Ukraine, and certainly Ukraine, could never accept, and potentially the West, given that probably many of these individuals are, let's think of Budanov, for instance, are intimately and inextricably linked to Western intelligence. Just a thought that I had on there. Anyway, that wraps up Lavrov's. And here is where I was talking about the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And here's also a little question that popped in my mind. It's, why is this such a center of focus? Is it just because it's a nuclear power plant? Is it just that? Or is there something more to this? As is rightly pointed out here, and of course Russia won't, well, they have negotiated on it. In the last round of negotiations, there was talk of shared control. Zelensky, as it says here, previously rejected the possibility of a compromise, and yet that was what was stated in Abu Dhabi. And he apparently stated he's going to fight for it and Donbass. It says here about Zelensky's reluctance to give up Donbass and the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant without a fight. The quote from Peskov here, I thought I'd highlighted it, apologies. Naturally, we've seen these statements. Again, we're going around the same wheel here. First of all, in this context, it's important to note that the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant has been under Russian control for over 2 years. And the question here is, does this mean the Kiev regime intends to fight to recapture the nuclear power plant? And does it intend to attack the plant? Well, it already has. Many times, numerous times. Do you remember the assaults that were made on it? And do you remember the IAEA staff that were targeted? And yet the IAEA refused. They were like, well, gosh, we can't possibly know where these drones came from. Really? Really? I think it's pretty obvious which side they originated from and who was doing it. But no, they proved themselves to be spineless, as is the case with many of these Western agencies that Russia accommodates, tolerates, and sadly entertains. So yeah, we're playing this track on the same record again. And finally, yeah, the UN, another useless Western organization and structure. They've apparently claimed that it's not like Greenland. It's a bit different. Crimea and Donbass, nah. Self-determination doesn't apply to them. And good on the DPR for calling the UN insignificant. I think that's a really good descriptor. They are utterly insignificant. The UN has become a worthless organization. Here. I mean, whether it ever wasn't is another question. Apologies, my translation is coming and going. But suffice to say, it's a really disappointing statement from Guterres, I believe it is, who's also saying that the UN is going to financially collapse. The sooner the better, in my opinion, particularly in light of these comments. This is by Alexander Kaufman. I've actually met him in person. And will never recognize the right of residents of Donbass and Crimea to self-determination, despite the precedent of Kosovo's unilateral declaration of independence. So rules for thee, but not for me. It's sort of, yeah, that well done to Kaufman to bring that up. Back in 2014, I said the UN had become a completely insignificant organization, Kaufman said. There's no need to rely on Greenland. The Kosovo incident is enough to accept the right of the residents of Donbass or Crimea to self-determination. But of course, the UN will never recognize this fact. More hypocrisy, and again, more of the same, I'm sorry to report, but we're seeing it played over and over. Hey, finally, I'll move on to my new favorite open source intelligence resource here, the Pizza Index. And this one is US-Iran. What caught my eye here is the likelihoods here on Polymarket, I believe it is. US strikes on Iran by March 31st, 2026. That has increased by 342.4%. So, I mean, it was about this level before. It dropped off, but it suddenly spiked. If you... is it further down? Yeah. And then June 30th is at 72%. So people seem fairly convinced that it's going to happen. And it's not just Polymarket. I'll get into a long-winded article that I'm going to skip through here. This is on vz.ru. Here, Alexander Timokin, he goes in great length. He talks about, how Iran might fight the US, etc., etc. Even going into sort of aircraft capabilities, ICBMs, cruise missiles, Shahid drones, the suicidal nature of some of the armed forces who are willing to sacrifice themselves. It goes a lot of deal. It's the last bit that really struck me. But Iran, unfortunately, has found itself in a hopeless situation. The peculiarity of the American approach is that it uses negotiations as a weapon or a means of prolonging a war. Could you draw some similarities to Russia and Ukraine here? Because, yeah, we've seen lots of negotiations that, as I say, don't really seem to be progressing despite Trump's assurances. As a way to deceive a foolish adversary, which lends into my previous point about perhaps Russians, again, a little bit peeved with these agreements, but never as negotiations proper. Therefore, Trump's ultimatum is a lie. The US will still attack, it's just that it will be later.